this is a little bit of a talk about how Venerable says many times, you really think you're just a set of causes and conditions. So this is a talk about self and non-self. So as Buddhists, we talk about these three characteristics of all conditioned phenomena, which are impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. And so when we talk about impermanence, we understand that all compounded things are the result of a specific set of causes and conditions, and that's pretty easy to accept. But then in terms of non-self, we see that all these things that are compounded, that are just a specific set of causes and conditions, lack any enduring, eternal, permanent, real entity. And the word in Sanskrit for that is drava, which is the one word you have to learn today. Drava means real entity or substratum of being or substance of being. It's the word that when you hear substantially existent, it's what it refers to. That's drava sat. So anyway, we've all learned that the self that we think exists is not one that's permanent, partless, and independent. It's not one that is a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. There's that word. And so the Buddha was really against any kind of analysis of phenomena that imputed this kind of reality to the person. And so when people asked him questions, he'd reframe these questions away from a self or a soul or an Atman. And so if someone asked, who is it that senses, or who is having this pleasant or unpleasant feeling, the Buddha would reject that, saying it was wrongly conceived. And then he'd reframe it in terms of conditionality, and he would rephrase it and say, with what as condition does feeling occur? And so we know contact, right? Or if someone says, who's reborn? Then he'd rephrase it and he would say, with what as condition does birth occur? And that would be becoming a renewed existence, the 10th link. So we have this idea that there's something real, this real entity, this drava. There, when we think of that, we're conceiving of something that has unique characteristics of their own being. And, being steeped in the Madhyamaka view, we know that we reject that notion that anything, persons or any other phenomena, have this kind of existence. There's nothing, no substance, real entity, which for Madhyamakas, that word drava became synonymous with inherent existence. And so we reject that for all phenomena. And so you could say that as a self, there's no substantial existence, there's no intrinsic or inherent existence, there's no setting yourself up apart, independent of all other factors, there's no own being, there's no unique characteristics of its own. But then what got me really thinking about this was I read a quote in a book. So we do accept that things do exist conventionally, so there's a conventionally existent self, but just how do we see that self or person? Do we actually see it that is something that's just a result of causes and conditions? And I would have to say for myself, no. And even in a way that I was surprised, I don't see it. So let me read you this quote that I read, and I was like, it kind of really surprised me. So this person is writing, and I'm just going to give you the first part. The Western conception of the person as bounded, unique, more or less integrated, motivational and cognitive universe, a dynamic center of awareness, emotion, judgment, and action, organized into a distinctive whole and set contrastively against other such wholes, and against the social and natural background. So he's kind of describing this self that we see as a conventional self. And I read that and I'm like, yeah, I actually see everyone through all times that way. And so in my mind, I was like, well, what am I really seeing? And okay, a conventionally existent person as herself is bounded, like confined, like I'm limited by this expanse here. And unique, and that means like one of a kind, or unlike anything else, or special, or different, or particular. Yeah, I kind of feel that way. And I think that about all you too. a more or less integrated motivational and cognitive universe. Well, I feel like I have this universe inside of me of my experience, my cognitions, my motivations, its own sphere of activity and experience. And I'm integrated that into this whole, this internal universe of cognitions and motivations. And I think that about all of you too. And throughout all people throughout all the time, I think all of this. And how about a dynamic center of awareness, emotion, judgment, and action? Yeah, I think that fits the description. You all fit that description for me. And then organize into a distinctive whole. So yeah, I feel like I'm packaged in this one contraption here, and you're over there in your contraptions, and we're all in this room as unique wholes. And I'm set contrastively against other such wholes, like all of you and everyone else, and against a social and natural background. And I would say, yes, I'm like one self in a society, and I'm like one part of a certain social network, but maybe not another social network. And I'm like, I do think of myself as like in nature in a way, but I'm not of the natural world. I'm a little separate from the natural world. I'm not the same as these trees and everything else. So I think when I don't think about anything at all, I think all of these things. And so what he says is that he says this Western conception of the person in all these ways just described, however incorrigible, which means confirmed, habitual, or hardened, however much we hold that, and however much that may seem that way to us, this is actually a rather peculiar idea within the context of the world's cultures. And then these books that I read go on to explain all these different ideas from different cultures, different times. And it was so evident that this is actually a rather new idea. This is the way I hold myself, and I hold all of you. And I kind of thought everybody in all the different eras and millennia were kind of this way too, is not how other people have seen it. We have just a conception of what the conventional self is, and it happens to be, somewhat like this at this period of time. And so there are other, like for instance, one example that kind of stood out to me was, we have the word individual. And that word, kind of sets you apart from others. But actually, that word didn't always work that way. That became that way, at least in a dictionary, in 1647. Before that, the word individual meant more like indivisible. Like when they referred to a man and a wife, those two individuals were indivisible. Or like I want to say the triple gem, but it was like the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. This is actually a word that united things instead of separating things. Or like actually in ancient Chinese culture, they had a philosophy called sympathetic resonance as one translation. And this philosophy led to a kind of cosmology where they felt like that human beings were actually completely an integral part of the whole of nature, not separate and apart. And then this book goes on and on through all these different ideas, through the Renaissance and how everybody's identities were and everything. But my main point why I wanted to bring this up is just because it shocked me so much that, I couldn't really think about this any other way. And I thought throughout all the time, without ever thinking about it, everyone would hold themselves this way. But actually, we are a set of causes and conditions, and our conception about this self is actually also a product of causes and conditions that relate to just our time period. So if we were born in a different century and a different time, we wouldn't even think of our conventional self the way that we do now. So it's just an interesting idea. And when you're laying there at the lake reading a book, you have time to meander in your thoughts. So maybe this will loosen up our ideas of ourselves.